And we're live reviewing
Woohoo!
2 episodes today of 2 completely different series. And the first one will be... It's going to be Homicide because it's what's in the title.
Homicide, Life on the Street.
Jeff persuaded me to watch this, but he showed me a key scene from... Which episode was it, Jeff?
Oh, you mean the Pimbleton scene?
Yeah.
I actually forgot the name of that episode, but that's actually from the second season. So you'll get to that full episode later, but the one we watched last night was the very first episode of Homicide, which is called Gone for Good. So it introduces all the main characters. So we have Lieutenant Giardello, and we have the detectives Frank Pimbleton, Tim Bayliss, Kay Howard, Bo Felton, John Munch, Stanley Bolander, Meldrick Lewis, and Steve Cressetti. I think those are I don't think I missed anybody. I think that's all the main characters.
I think, from my point of view, there seems to be like 2 or 3 comedy-ish characters, light relief characters. There's Munch.
The very beginning scene starts with Lewis and Cressetti.
Yeah, they're light relief-ish.
And you get kind of their interesting takes on things. Cressetti, the first of many conspiracy theories he has about things, including the Lincoln assassination.
Yeah, that was good. I like the detail in that.
Lewis is much more what you see is what you get in his approach to things.
Is he the
Cressetti's partner.
Right, is he the
the main thing that Cressetti and Lewis do in the first episode is they're trying to solve a case that involves this woman named Calpurnia Church, who appears to be getting life insurance policies on her husbands and then arranging their deaths.
Yeah.
So they actually dig up the body of one of those, and then they find out it's the wrong person. And the funeral director guy is hilarious.
Yeah, so, I mean, she did have 5 husbands, and she did have a policy to have 5 husbands.
Styrofoam, buried like a hamburger. Love that guy.
Yeah, didn't exactly love them.
You need somebody else? How many you need? So that's the main case Lewis and Cressetti are working on, which doesn't get solved, so to speak, by the end of the episode, or at least they haven't arrested Calpurnia. And I won't spoil it, but I'll just say that there are still things to come in that story. Bayliss is, like I mentioned in the Hangout the other day, is sort of like the audience liaison to the squad in terms of he's the new guy. He comes in and Lieutenant Giardello, that they call G, introduces him to all, shows him around the squad room and tells him stuff about shows him the box and the board and all that stuff. And
oh yeah, I like him.
He wants Bayliss to be paired with Kay Howard because she's got the best clearance rate of any of the detectives. She's basically got a streak going where she closes all her cases, so he wants, the rookie to be with her. But she's already partnered with Bo Felton, and so G sticks Felton with Pimbleton, but that doesn't last very long because they end up sort of switching out, and Bayliss ends up with Pimbleton. Felton and Howard are work on a case, dead body found in the bottom of an apartment, and then the guy that did it is one of the stupid criminals. That's a common theme. In fact, even Pimbleton says at one point, "Crime makes you stupid," in response to a question from Bayliss. So they show some stupid criminals. One of the cases that Bolander and Munch are working on, there's another stupid guy who keeps changing his story. And they also, Bolander's kind of pressuring Munch to solve an old case of this girl that got killed named Jenny Goode, which is where the episode gets its title.
Oh, can you remember the dialogue about Larry King and Montel Williams?
Oh yeah, I remember pretty much all the dialogue.
But I think that's a funny section, and also the guy, he reacts to him the way that a lot of people react to EMTPers.
Yeah, many more people over the course of Munch's life would do that, including all of his ex-wives. And
If he'd be a better Doctor Who than the ones this century, that guy. But could they afford him? Probably not.
I don't know, because he ended up, for the audience's sake, if you don't know, John Munch ended up being the longest-running television character in American history, because he was on Homicide for about 7 years, and then went on to play that same character on Law and Order SVU for another 15 years. So he played the character for 22 years, basically.
Wow.
So he passed Marshall Dillon from Gunsmoke as the longest running, at least live action character. Because the Simpsons have been on longer right now.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Bart Simpson seems to have been 10 forever.
Yeah. But Ben, since this was your first time watching Homicide, other than just clips, I'd like to get kind of your first impressions of what you thought about.
I thought the characterization was very good. I liked the quirks. One of the things that struck me straight away was the way they talk. They don't talk like in normal drama where people talk a lot slower and clearer. They sort of talk at a natural pace. And
yeah,
for my ears, it was quite tricky to get used to their accents for about the first third of it.
And that's interesting because, of course, me watching Black 7, I had a little bit of the same thing because, I'm not necessarily used to their accents either. So
those ones in Blake 7, they're pretty much all like the British equivalent of American theatre standard. It was all rather Shakespearean.
Even that, though, it's still, right off the bat, I didn't understand all the dialogue. But became a little clearer as it went on.
Yeah.
But other than Munch, which you said you thought was ENTP, was anybody who the particular type related things that jumped out at you at any of the characters? Or
just that the way Pembleton, is it Pembleton?
Yeah.
With the way Pembleton being an SP, I agree with you in that, and I like that conspiracy theory Italian American guy.
Corsetti, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thinking is he might be an NT, but I think he's an NTJ rather than an NTP.
I also like the performance of the chief. I think it's G.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like that has been like such a staple. Like you have the black police chief, and they even had that in an Arnold Schwarzenegger film called Last Action Hero.
Yeah, they crossed it up in Homicide by having him. He's a black guy, but he's got an Italian name. So they do a little joke with the audience that way by having Bayless reach his hand out to Corsetti to shake it, and because he thinks he's the Lieutenant Giardello because he looks Italian to him.
Yeah.
And G goes, "Hey, I'm Giardello." Does like the exaggerated Italian accent.
Yeah, I didn't pick that
And
up.
I thought it was great how they introduced Pimbleton, because everybody else they introduced them by showing you him, and then with Pimbleton they have people talking about him before
Yeah,
the show. So you get the other characters' perspectives on Pimbleton before you actually are introduced to him. And over the course of the series, you'd get to know a little bit more, obviously, of him personally, rather than sort of the reputation that you get from the first episode.
it,
Where
I also thought it was one of those programs that has rewatch value because of the dialogue, because there's so much packed in to the style of dialogue.
Yep.
And that might have been another reason why they had them talk so quickly, is maybe they wanted to pack more in.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I talked before with Ben about that they were, over the course of this time the series was on the air, they had constant fights with the network about certain content. Not from a standpoint where some shows would be with the censors over things, and there were a few things with censors, but a lot of it was more like the network trying to steer the direction of the show to get better ratings. And the whole
Right.
pitch when the show started by Barry Levinson, one of the co-creators of the show, was about how different it was and how it wasn't going to be like the typical cop shows on the air. And then the network kept asking for things to make it more like all the other cop shows on TV. And so they said things like, "It's too dark, make it brighter. There's too much jerky camera stuff. Stop doing so much of that. Make the dialogue easier to understand. Put in more action, more chase scenes, more gunshots, but more happy endings. More cases solved quickly. All the things that were realistic about the show, because it was based on a book that was written about the actual Baltimore Homicide Department, written by David Simon. And so all the stuff he put in that they put in was straight out of the book, like the board and a lot of the first, the cases from the first couple of years were straight out of the book. The characters were based on the real detectives from the book.
One of the things I noticed was whenever they wrote on the board, I thought, that's actually very neat handwriting there.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
One thing you can tell, well, I noticed, is that most of the time the board in real life is not being written on by the actors, or at least, not the ones playing the detectives. It's written by somebody with better handwriting.
Yes.
Because when you see them erase a name and write it, it's never that neat.
Yeah, it's like super neat.
But yeah, the episode ended with Bayless, the rookie, taking his first call as a primary detective, and he shows up at the crime scene, and it's in the rain, and it's a young girl on the ground. So
I think there's a famous thing we can tell the audience about with Pembleton not wanting to back down with the keys and go up and get a new set of keys. Was it a new set of keys with a number on?
I am not going upstairs. Yeah, Pembleton gives some definite insight into his personality in the first episode, because he has that scene. He has the scenes, in the box, when Bayless says, "Are you going to interrogate the suspect?" And he says, "What you'll be privileged to witness is not an interrogation, but an act of salesmanship." And I always said, it's a performance, is what it really is. But, and then, of course, after the scene with the suspect,
yeah, that
Bayless
was what
gives him a hard time about whether he actually respected the suspect's rights or not.
I think he did, but it was close, and that was well written.
Yeah. Pimbleton defends his actions, and then Bayless says something that prompts Pimbleton to say, "Was that a line from your textbook, rookie? Stay out of my face."
You see, that was good. That was something that marked it as different, in that in a lot of dramas you would have like that would be like the point of view, like the progressive point of view, and then he sort of like slams down that progressive point of view.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in Homicide being sort of a reality check.
Yeah.
To anybody who's got an agenda, that's a little too sure of themselves.
Or idealistic.
Right. Or, thinking they know better than the way people are doing certain things.
Another thing that just a general view is that the acting is faultless. There's nothing that pulls you out of it, and so that helps you get into the world. So it's not just so it's the good acting, it's the good characterization. It's
they all seem very natural.
Yeah.
There's nobody like, even when they do things that are sort of monologues in a way where it's not the back and forth, there's nothing that sounds like somebody's like mugging for the camera or giving a speech or whatever. It all comes off as things they would still naturally say within the job. Because you have the scene where they're eating lunch, and that's the time where they're probably the most like pontificating about stuff. But all that, it still flows naturally, and most of it is exchanges between, like, when they start talking about, Richard Belzer played Munch as a stand-up comedian, so of course he got a chance to do a few lines from his stand-up when he's at the lunch table, because he can say the stuff about when did the Romans become the Italians, went from friends, Romans, countrymen to, hey, yo, over here. And then he does the thing about the Irish and the potato famine, like, Ireland is an island. They're surrounded by fish. How could they starve just because they didn't have potatoes?
Was that Munch? Yeah, I think
yeah.
Munch, yeah.
So those lines were directly out of his stand-up act, but it fit with the character and fit with the scene, so it worked fine.
Another scene that sort of like pointed it out as sort of like as sort of as a sort of a non-right-on program was like the bit where they spoofed where they had the Italian saying that he was going to make a racially based complaint.
Yeah. Because Lewis called him a fathead guinea and a salami brand. Yeah, I mean, they were a little. You have to understand, like, this show was, I mean, it wasn't like it was in the 60s or something, it was early 90s, but it was still a little bit edgy.
Yeah, 92, that episode, yeah.
Because right in the first episode, you had, you had somebody being called a guinea, another person calling himself a nigger, so you had both of that. You had some things that they probably did make the network censors a little bit wary in the first
episode. But I think...
But it grabbed the audience. It was very, like, real dialogue,
Yeah. Not just real dialogue, but performed at the pace.
Yeah. And I know there's one thing on the commentary they mentioned that was, again, a thing that the network hated, but Barry Levinson, who directed the first episode, did on purpose, because it's the kind of thing he liked to do. In the scene with Pimbleton and Felton, when they're going back and forth about the car and each other, and there's that tension between them. They keep yelling at each other, but the camera shows Corsetti and Lewis, who are walking out to their car. And Barry Levinson said there's a lot of shows where they wouldn't do that, where they would show them coming out, but they would hold the dialogue and then they'd switch back to them for that scene where he's up in his face. And instead, they had him say it while the camera wasn't even showing them. It was showing the other two. and he said it's like realistic because it was like they show their reaction and they're just kind of laughing. So it breaks it. The tension is there, but then it breaks the tension of the audience. It's like, they're in this intense thing where they're in each other's faces, but then we're going to show the other two guys kind of laughing it off, like, oh, there they go again.
Yeah, and generally they have it does a good balance. The tone is right as well, where you have these lighter characters, these 2 or 3 lighter characters that sort of balances it out.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll see if you continue to watch over the time is that all of the characters can be both. They all have their serious moments and they all have their lighter moments. So they don't all fill those same roles all the time.
Well, so far I don't think of anything to fault it.
But as I said the other day, not a lot of NF around that show. A lot of majority are thinking types, but there's the feelers are in there too. Just there's less of them.
That one chick seemed like an NF.
Who?
The one I didn't like at all. The blonde haired chick who came in later. Was
forced
to be captained by the network.
Maybe. I won't say too much about her for Ben because he hasn't gotten to her yet. But anyway, I'm not convinced she was an NF, but I guess it's possible. Yeah, so more thinking types, mostly ST types of different varieties, STPs and STJs, but a few exceptions to that. Pimbleton and Lewis, I think, are both SFPs, and Bayless the SFJ. So you got the ESTJ boss, and he'll give lots of examples over the course of the show, where you see his personality come out, and if you go by the function pair stuff, then you see lots of both TE and SI,
and some SE as well,
because he is very much bottom line.
Yeah.
The board has red. I want you to turn it black because that means you solve the case. And just close the cases, close the case, close the case. And then when he's not giving orders like that, then he's reminiscing about stuff from the old days, and he remembers all the little details about all of it. Can tell you, exactly what happened and what day and when, and all about the restaurants that used to be on this street and how they're not there anymore, and all that stuff. The girls he dated in school, and then Munch's partner, Stan Bolander, I think, the ISTJ, who's very much the kind of just good-natured but grumpy, punch the clock, do your job, go
Was
home.
he the guy that was eating quite a bit?
He might have done some eating. It was Munch's partner, so any of the scenes that they were...
So, did he ever, make the silly joke, you're called Munch, but he's the guy that eats a lot?
What?
He's called Munch, but the other guy is the one that does most of the munching.
Are you saying, did anybody ever make that joke?
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody making that joke, no.
No.
There might have been a few people who said something about his name, but it didn't seem to be that big a deal. That actually may be one of the few unrealistic things about the show. You would think the more people probably would have said something about his name.
Or they might have said, you might be called Munch, but you don't look like you've done much munching. You're rather thin.
I think probably there's a character that comes along later, the ESTP character, Kellerman, and I think he actually made some kind of comment to that effect, but it was pretty brief and not really, a big deal. But he just sort of reacts to hearing the name the first time, kind of like Munch, or something like that. But I don't even remember exactly what he said.
It's something like, "Why did you used to do a lot of marijuana?" or something like that.
Yeah, I think he did. But that'll come up later, because there's lots of dialogue between Munch and Bolander that kind of gives some exposition to their history, you learn about their respective ex-wives and things like that.
So, how about now if we go on to the Blake 7 half of this recording?
Did you want to do it all as one video or stop and do another one for that?
Okay, I'll stop and do another one. Yep.
Okay.
I'll be.
Okay, so
bye bye, folks.
before you do that, I just want to say that the plan is to, to do this on a semi-regular basis. So we'll be.
Oh yes.
We'll be back to, once we watch the second episode of Homicide to talk about that one too. And
oh yeah.
I've seen the whole series. Obviously, I have a lot more perspective on the characters, but as Ben sees the episodes, I'm sure he'll have more stuff to say as he learns who's who and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and learns to understand them more, their dialogue. And eventually I'll be able to watch it. I won't say how, but I'll be able to watch it maybe with some subtitle files as well to help.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So, yeah,
bye.
those are thoughts on Gone for Good. And
yeah.
The next episode is called Ghost of a Chance. So we'll be back later on with that.
Right, so bye for now, folks.
Bye.